right, guys. So unfortunately, when we had the meeting in person, I was not able to record it. I'm not sure what happened there. So we're trying it again. But today we are going to be talking about women mastering stress, and this is a two-part series. Today we'll be talking about part one. We will be talking about what stress is. We'll talk about the HPA axis and the cortical awakening response system. We'll talk about how stress impacts our body, and we'll start to talk about what stressors we have control of and focusing on those. And we'll talk about gratitude, affirmations, and meditations, and basically the science behind why they work. And so we're going to be talking a lot today about stress, what it is, how it impacts us, but we're barely going to touch briefly on things to start doing about it. Whereas part two will be basically focusing on those things that we can do to manage our stressors. So again, this is kind of just the start of this topic, right? So first, stress is basically any perceived threat that causes a direct impact on our internal physiology. So we might see an increase in blood pressure or heart rate or our temperature, and we're going to see cortisol be released. So any type of perceived threat. So I've mentioned here 4 types of stressors, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but I thought it was easy to kind of break it down into these topics. So we have or these categories rather. So we have physical stress. This can come from over exercising, or it can be from a high training volume with not enough rest. It can be from physical trauma, labor and delivery, not allowing tissues to heal, or just carrying pain. This can be from poor posture, which would in turn impact our breathing, right? We might have more shallow chest breathing rather than nice belly breathing. We can have nutritional stressors, which we talked about a lot last week, where that can be from having micronutrient deficiencies or foods that are deficient of those micronutrients. This can be from eating foods that our body might be sensitive to. It can be from dehydration of not just water, but our electrolytes, or it can be from chronic caloric restriction or dieting, right? We can also have lifestyle stressors, which can be our relationships or financial struggles. It can be from lack of sleep quality or quantity, or it can be from things in our environment like mold or chemicals or cumulative exposure to these types of things that are impacting our body internally. And then we have internal stressors, which you'll notice can kind of fall into other categories as well, but it can be inflammation, whether from exercise or nutrition, foods that are causing inflammation in the body or toxins. It can be from gut dysfunction, medications that we're taking, or it can be from immune or autoimmune issues and such like that. So again, stress can encompass a lot of things, and I think it's helpful to break it down this way to really pinpoint what things we think we might be experiencing that hopefully we can address. So stress drives our hormones from the top down. So basically that means, so our hormones are chemical messengers, and they communicate from one organ to the next and tell it what to do. And so stress starts here at the brain, and it really impacts our bodily systems down into our body, right? So we're going to talk about the HPA axis, or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this is our body's main stress response system. So we have our hypothalamus in our brain, and it releases corticotropic releasing hormone to the pituitary gland in the brain, which then has or causes adrenocorticotropic hormone to release to the adrenal glands, which are those orange triangles or glands that are sitting on top of our kidneys there. And these then release cortisol into our bloodstream. So cortisol is known as our stress hormone, and cortisol will help mobilize energy so that we have glucose to fuel our body to deal with stressors, right? So it's going to fuel our musculoskeletal system or to respond and react to stress. This also releases adrenaline into our system. So this increases our heart rate and our blood pressure. So we have energy, right, to deal with perceived stressor. So cortisol will slow down our non-essential body functions because, again, that energy needs to go to the musculoskeletal system to respond and react. So things like our immune system, our digestive system, and our reproduction system those are non-essential and when perceiving or dealing with a threat, and so those get shut down. So you can see that if these systems are shut down for a prolonged period of time, that's going to wreak some havoc on our health, with our immune system being shut down, with trying to digest our food and utilize nutrition, and even we might see it impact our reproduction or fertility. So we also have the cortical awakening response system, and this basically just describes the relationship between cortisol and melatonin. So we know cortisol is our stress hormone and melatonin is our sleepy hormone, or it helps us know when to feel tired. It really has more to do with our circadian rhythm. And so when cortisol is at its peak or its highest, cortisol should be low. And conversely, in the morning, when we wake up around 6 or 7 a.m., our cortisol should be at the highest. So we feel awake and energized, and our melatonin should be at the lowest, right? So we're not feeling sleepy. Sometimes we feel wired and tired, and this is the feeling of being tired all day, and you finally get to your bed and you lay your head down and you can't sleep, right? Your mind's just racing a mile a minute and you just can't relax, right? And so this wired and tired feeling comes from that cortisol being high when it shouldn't be, and melatonin being low. So when we should be ready to go to bed, those hormones are not quite where they should be. And this might be a sign that we are experiencing some chronic stress. So if our body's in this prolonged state of chronic stress, right, we're in this state of fight or flight all the time, and then cortisol remains high and it disrupts a lot of body processes that we're going to talk about in a minute. But you can experience adrenal fatigue, which is where your cortisol is dropped. And this is less common, but this is where maybe for like a high competitive athlete who's competing every weekend, their cortisol spike to deal with high intensity exercise and the, nerves that you get and then the adrenaline that you get from competition. And this person has just used so much cortisol that the adrenal glands are now fatigued and cannot produce more cortisol. And you will see things like fatigue, inflammation, allergies, poor exercise intolerance, and things like that. In converse, we can have our cortisol being too high chronically, which will, like we talked about, suppress the immune system. It's going to slow down things like wound healing and bone formation. This can cause increase in abdominal fat because it will impact our satiation, and we'll see disrupted sleep because if our cortisol is high, melatonin is low. So you can take a moment and look at that slide where we put into categories the type of stressors and think about what stressors might be prevalent in your life and might be impacting you. You can kind of jot them down so that we can kind of take a deep look and deep dive into these as we go into learning how to manage our stressors. So stress impacts our hormones, it downregulates our reproduction because growing and nurturing a baby takes a lot of energy. And so if our body is perceiving some sort of threat, our body might be having a period, but it might not be ovulating. So the brain will reduce luteinizing hormone and follicular stimulating hormone, which are important in our menstrual cycle and ovulation. And we might see a drop in our insulin and our leptin, which helps us regulate our hunger. And we might also see progesterone and estrogen drop when we're under stress, which is why some people lose their period altogether. Stress will impact our appetite. This was a very interesting study that was done on mice, but they basically took two groups of mice and they exposed them to stress. And this is why the study was done on mice, because it's not ethical, right, to put humans under stress. And so what they did was one group was offered regular chow or regular food, and the other was offered food that had more fat and more sugar. It was enriched chow, and they call this highly palatable food, right? And so they found that the group that was only exposed to regular chow did not eat much. They did not want to eat their food, whereas the group that was exposed to this highly palatable food with the higher fat and sugar content, they ate and consumed more calories. And so putting this into perspective for humans, right? Again, take it with a grain of salt. It wasn't done on humans, it was done on mice. But we're almost never in a situation where we cannot easily access hyperpalatable foods when we're stressed, right? Most of us live 2 to 3 minutes away from somewhere where we can buy cookies or chips or whatever it is that we want to help us cope with that stress in the moment and provide us with instant energy. Okay, so again, we know hormones are chemical messengers and they really work in all parts of our body. And so at the brain level, we see that cortisol will increase our appetite and our cravings because we need that energy. And like we talked about last week, if your body doesn't feel safe or you're feeling constantly tired all the time, it's because it wants you to stay put and not reserve energy. It feels, I'm safe right here, I'm not safe out there, so don't move me and don't use more energy than I have to. At the liver level, we'll see that cortisol drives gluconeogenesis, which is basically the creation of sugar from amino acids, which will elevate our blood sugar, which we talked about last week. If our blood sugar is elevating, it might then be crashing and leave us feeling like we have no energy. At the muscle level, there's a decrease in glucose uptake. So what happens then is instead of having the energy that we need in our brain and body, or I'm sorry, in the bloodstream, we're now using muscle. We're breaking down our muscle to get that energy that we need right now. Okay, and we'll also see that this impacts something called our heart rate variability. And this is really cool because this is an actual measurement that we can take if you have, a smart watch or the Oura Ring, or other devices out there that can track your heart rate variability. This can give you a number to kind of start seeing for you what stress and not stressed looks like. But essentially, our heart rate variability is a measure of the variation between your heartbeats. Okay, so it's measuring the time between your heartbeats. And so when that time is great, that means that you have lower stress and you have more ability to handle stress. If it's low, that means those heartbeats are closer in time. That means you're probably already dealing with more stress and you're not going to be able to adapt well to more stress. So a good goal for your morning HRV is somewhere around 70 or higher, but again, this varies person to person. So you might find for you that might be different. So that's why it's helpful sometimes to track to see what a restful, like I got a good night of sleep, I ate well last night, and I feel really low stress, and see what that number is for you. But in general, this is a standard goal. And then if your heart rate variability is between 50 and 60, it's kind of telling you, okay, I'm dealing with a lot of stress today. Maybe I didn't sleep well. Maybe I'm still sore from my workout, or man, that was just like a stressful day at work yesterday. And so with that in the morning, you can say, okay, where can I minimize my stressors today? Maybe I really want to focus on getting to bed at a decent time. Maybe I really want to focus on, increasing my exercise demand today by going for a walk instead of doing my strength training. Okay, and so we'll see other impacts from stress as well. When we are in a meditative or restful type of state, we have these slow, long wavelengths versus when we're under stress, we have high beta waves in our brain, and these are associated with feelings of anxiousness or unease and agitation. We will see arterial stiffness, so our blood vessels will actually get stiffer, which is, not ideal because that can start to lead to things like clotting and stroke and heart attack. Instead of using our forebrain, right, where we have our prefrontal cortex and we're able to problem solve and think strategically and with rationale, our brain is using our hindbrain because we need to be kind of like impulsive and respond quickly to stressors. And so our hindbrain is now working more because it's our primitive brain, right? And it needs to react. And so chronic stress, if we're in this chronic state of stress, can actually affect both the brain structure and the function. Like we might see more areas are lit up or utilized because of constant stress. And then cortisol will also spike high during an extremely stressful event, and then it will drop and it can be overly low, which will leave you feeling exhausted. For example, when I was working in the hospital, I was working with a patient, and sadly, he had a pulmonary embolism that we did not know about. And basically, this is a clot that came from his lungs, and when it moved, he died instantly. And I was the only person in the room with him. So when this happened, of course, that was a stressful situation for me to experience. And luckily, my friend who is an RN student, or an almost RN, she warned me that I would probably have that crash from both the cortisol and adrenaline and feel exhausted afterwards, and I did. So this is good to know, if you are experiencing stressful situations, you should honor that. You're going to feel exhausted. Don't push through things like that, right? And then we'll talk about the impacts of stress on acne. So in one study by Jovic in 2017, they found that emotional stress was associated with the production of hormones that influence both the chronic course and the exacerbation of acne. And that was because of the mechanisms involved in the HPA axis and hormones, right, that play a substantial role in acne exacerbation and the course of it. And then another study by Sestrino in 2020, they had 100 people between the ages of 17 and 25. 68% of them were female, and they all had mild to moderate or severe acne. And basically they had them track their stress on a stress scale, so it was subjective, but they found that there was a positive correlation between their stress scale and the severity of acne. So basically, if they were experiencing higher levels of stress, they were experiencing more severe acne. And it's hard to say, did the stress cause the acne or is the acne causing the stress? But it was an interesting thing to know. So we're going to talk about, what control do we have over our stress, right? We can basically strategically address our lifestyle, the things we do every day, our nutrition, and our exercise. And basically the goal is that we are getting out of this state of chronic fight or flight, or not acute fight or flight, basically as fast as we can. If it's no longer serving us to be experiencing this spike in cortisol, we want to return to a calm and peaceful state as soon as possible. So we're going to focus on the things that we can control. There are some stressors that we do not have any control of. Maybe you're caring for a loved one, maybe you're caring for someone who's sick, and maybe you have a job that brings you a lot of stress, but financially you can't consider other options right now. So we're not going to focus on those, right? We need to focus on the things that we have control over. But before we go into this, I really want to kind of help put together, last week's PowerPoint, and we're talking about on stress together. So I'm going to give you an example myself of an athlete. Okay, so we have myself, 142-pound weightlifter. I was training 5 to 6 days a week, working full time, and I was a mother to an 18-month-old at the time, and I was only getting 4 to 6 hours of sleep. By appearance, it looks like I'm in good shape, but I could not cut 4 pounds for my life to make weight for my competition. And so I would have to resort to things like sitting in the sauna and spitting to get rid of water weight to make my weight for my athletic competition. So what I did was I started working with a coach or a trainer, and unfortunately they placed me on a caloric deficit. And what happened was I had an increase in weight, I was more irritable, and I had no libido, and my constipation got worse. So hopefully, after talking about last week's biofeedback form and stressors today, you can take a look at this scenario and realize, okay, she's overtraining and over exercising. She's working full time. And she's only getting like 4 to 6 hours of sleep. All those right there are types of stressors, right? And unfortunately, by placing me in a caloric deficit, you added another stressor. And so my cup of stress just kind of overflowed. And so instead of moving me closer to my goals, we moved me further away, unfortunately. Okay. So again, we focused on nutrition last week, but we want to have periods of maintenance and caloric deficit. We cannot just chronically be in a caloric deficit. We need to nourish our body, replenish those micronutrients, and slowly pull it back while also paying attention to our biofeedback markers, our digestion, our sleep, our stress. We also need to be managing our blood sugar, right? We want to make sure we're having balanced meals and we're spacing them out. So if you want more info on that, go back and review the nutrition course we talked about. Oops. All right. Training. So exercise is a stressor, but it's a beneficial one because it causes positive adaptations like muscle growth or cardiovascular endurance or improving our bone density. But if it's not done strategically or if it's done in excess, we can actually be causing more inflammation and causing more cortisol than we need to, and then not be reaping all the benefits. So we're going to dive really deep into this in our future course. So that's all, I'll leave it at that for today. And then lifestyle. And so this is our inner voice, our mood, our energy, how we're sleeping. And then basically the activities that we're doing every day, right? Our routines, our habits, and our rituals. We want to make sure that what we're doing every single day is supporting our stress and minimizing it rather than increasing it. Okay, so first I want to talk about the reticular activating system. And this is essentially the science behind why affirmations and gratitude work. So it's a bundle of nerves that sit on our brainstem, and its job is to regulate our behavioral arousal, our consciousness, and our motivation. So basically what this means is the reticular activating system controls the stimulus or the information that we're being aware of, right? It kind of picks and chooses what to pay attention to. And so that motivates us to behave a certain way. So for example, if you've ever gotten a new car, like say you got a new silver Tesla, and all of a sudden you notice like everybody else has a silver Tesla. Well, no, everybody didn't just get a silver Tesla, but now it's something that your brain has decided is important to you, and now you're noticing it, right? Another example is we have a family who's, living near an airport, mom and a dad and a baby. And when the baby makes noise, mom wakes to the baby, and dad sleeps through both the airplane and the baby making noise. Okay. Now, fast forward a couple weeks, mom is removed. Maybe she's, on vacation or something. And so dad's in the home with the baby. Now he still sleeps to the sound of the airplane, but he's waking to the sound of the baby because it is now important to him. His reticular activating system decided that it is now important to hear and respond to the baby while mom is gone. Okay, so you might be wondering, like, how does this impact my motivation? Well, our thoughts essentially become our reality. So our brain doesn't know the difference between the thought either and the real, reality that we're experiencing. So when you say things like, I'm not a morning person, or I can't stick to a meal plan, or I just can't live without coffee, our brain is literally going to seek ways to validate this and make it true in our reality to justify our thoughts. So again, this is the science behind why affirmations, gratitude, and vision boards and manifestation works. Okay, so gratitude is naming things you're thankful for, expressing gratitude for the things that you do already have. It makes you really focus more on those positive emotions while you're expressing that gratitude. We also have affirmations. These are basically phrases that we say to affirm who we are, who we want to be, how we want to feel. And these phrases will start with I am, I feel, or I have. And so even if you don't believe it now, you can train your body to start to believe and embody that affirmation with time and repetition. I like to give some examples. So for me, as mom of three, for my days as a stay-at-home mom, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of overstimulation. I noticed myself getting really tense and stiff. And so a mantra, or I guess an affirmation I started saying to myself was, I am calm and at peace. And in the moment, it kind of felt ridiculous to say this because I was definitely not calm and at peace. But I would just repeat it to myself, and I would put it up on my mirror in the morning, and I would definitely put it in my car when I have all the kids in the back seat. And I would start, I am calm and at peace, I am calm and at peace. And eventually I noticed when I said it, I would take a deep breath. I'm calm and at peace. And I really started to actually feel calm and at peace. And that thought would pop back into my brain without me necessarily intentionally thinking about it. So that's kind of how that works. We also have a meditation, which is basically an umbrella term that revolves around intentional thought or breathing. But ultimately, you're trying to reach a state of relaxation. And so gratitude and affirmations can be a form of meditation, but meditation can also include yoga or stillness or even prayer. And so this book here, Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty, is a really great book, but he uses the term monkey versus monk brain. And so I like to bring this up because basically monkey brain is when we are thinking about the future, the thing that I need to do next. We're thinking or perseverating on the past, and our brain is either in the future or the past, but it's really not here in the present. Whereas the monk brain is thinking more about our sensations and what we're experiencing right now. So what am I seeing? What am I touching and feeling? What am I hearing? And focusing, even on like my feet touching the ground and being in the present. And so I think this is really helpful because sometimes I will just feel my brain going a mile a minute and I'm like, whoa, I have a monkey brain right now and I want a monk brain. And so I will try to shift myself into focusing on the here and the now. And I think that personally, when I think of, Americans, I think that most of us are living in this monkey brain state majority of the time. Okay, so for affirmations, again, these are things you can say in sentences that feel good. I am, I feel, and I have. These are things you want to come true. You don't necessarily have to believe them yet. They can be things that you want to be, things you want to achieve, or things that you want to happen. And there's really just no rules. So we're going to go into an activation with that. So I want you to pause the video and write down like 3 to 10 affirmations and sometimes it can be helpful to identify limiting self-talk first and redirecting those. So I give you an example of I'm calm and at peace, and I'll give you another example. But I would come downstairs and I'd see a sink full of dishes and I would think, wow, like I have to do all these, like nobody cares about me, no one respects me, they just leave all their mess, like it's expected that I do this. And I felt really not valued. And because I was trying to figure out why it bothered me so bad, right? But I would have these ugly thoughts while doing the dishes. And so I have reframed that negative thought because it was not serving me in any way. And now I say, I am a valued mother and wife. I am a valued mother and wife. And I started really paying more attention to things that showed me that I was a valued mother and wife when my kids hugged me or said thank you, or they felt comforted by my words or my touch, right? And so this is where these could be really helpful. So you want to take these affirmations once you write them down and put them on sticky notes in your room, in your car, on your mirror, in your refrigerator, somewhere you're going to see them throughout the day. And you just want to repetitively recite them to yourself at least once a day or multiple times would be even better. Okay, and then we have gratitude. So this is naming things you're thankful for right now. So this is an easy thing we can all practice without necessarily having to pencil time into our day to do it. So this can be 3 things you name to yourself before you go to bed at night. Wow, I have a comfortable bed. I'm safe in my home. My children are tucked into their bed, whatever it is for you, whatever you're thankful for. Maybe you just had a nice conversation with your significant other. And then you can do 3 things when you wake up. And that could be, wow, I just got a great 8 hours of sleep. I'm so thankful. I feel well rested. One for me, tending to a baby at nighttime gets exhausting to wake up to a crying baby and interrupt your sleep when you're tired. And instead of having, those negative thoughts of, oh, this is not fun, this is not easy for me. Instead, I tried to focus on things I could be grateful for. So that was, wow, I'm so thankful I have an able body so I can attend to my children at night. I'm so thankful that I can provide breast milk to feed my baby and soothe her at the end of the night, right? So instead of focusing on, all those negatives, it's shifting your attention to positive thoughts. Perfect. Okay. And so there are many ways to do meditation and many outcomes can be achieved. So I put a couple examples here for you guys, but it can be something like trying to clear your head and focusing on your breath. Sometimes it's a 5-minute breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for 2, breathe out for 5 seconds or whatever it is, or you can repeat a mantra to yourself. You can try to focus on visualizing a future for yourself or a future version of yourself. You can even just become more aware of your thoughts and acknowledge them. And if it serves you, you can try to reframe them. I think I've given a couple examples already. This is kind of where I like to work, where I like to, if I find a thought that's not serving me and I'm experiencing it often, I try to reframe it and catch it in its tracks. But again, if that feels authentic to you. You can even just relax every part of your body from your head to toe. This is a technique I've used in the past when I can't sleep at night. One thing I like to repeat first, I say, I've done everything I need to do today. I've done everything I need to do today. And or there's nothing left for me to do. And then I start to relax every muscle, starting from the top of my head, relax my forehead, my eyebrows, I let my cheeks fall and my jaw and then my shoulders, and just work my way down my body and let everything just turn off and relax. And then you can do diaphragmatic breathing, which again is instead of this shallow chest breathing, we're taking deep breaths into your abdomen. So you can place a hand on your chest and a hand on your tummy. And as you inhale, try to feel your belly expand. And as you exhale, your belly should fall. So that's essentially what belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing is. And this helps lower our blood pressure, lower our heart rate, reduce stress and anxiety. And then many women, we find ourselves coming up with these like what if or worst case scenarios. And I found myself doing this in my garage the other day when I was exercising with my babies. You know, a questionable person was kind of near the garage, and I just started thinking like, what if we got abducted? And like, what if this happened? And I just went on this like weird spiral of thoughts. And I had to like stop myself and be like, that's not my reality right now, but I'm causing that cortisol spike. Just my thoughts alone were causing this this tension in my body and my heart rate to increase. So that wasn't serving me right. That wasn't helpful or beneficial in any way. So I needed to shift back to my here and my now, maybe close my garage and continue with my workout, right? So if you catch yourself with those worst case what if scenarios, try to redirect yourself to calm and peace or reality. Okay, so again, we focused a lot on identifying what stressors are and the way it impacts our body and can play a role in our health and fitness goals, really. And we briefly touched on some techniques, basically meditation and gratitude affirmations that we can start with. And so the bulk of part 2, we're going to start talking about our sleep and the impacts that that has on our stress, how we can optimize on our sleep quality and quantity, and promoting melatonin. And we'll talk about toxin exposure and reducing our exposure to those things, as they do play a role on the HPA axis, or our body's main stress response system. And then finally, we'll talk about our daily like routines and activities. And lastly, supplements or adaptogens that can help with stress management as well. All right, thanks guys.